All right, Hamish, where shall we start? I'll talk about China because they just missed their fourth quarter GDP estimates.
Right.
And in the same release, they also have resumed posting their youth unemployment data after suspiciously stopping a little while ago. So, yeah, I wonder why. It's gone over 20%. We must stop.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get to that. So China, they missed their fourth quarter GDP estimates on Wednesday, while they resumed reporting the youth unemployment rate for young people, obviously, youth unemployment. Gross domestic product, or GDP, grew 5.2% in October to December from a year earlier. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics showed, quickening from 4.9% in the third quarter, but missing the 5.3% forecast in a Reuters poll. So still,
Right.
I don't know. I feel like that's still pretty impressive.
Yeah.
5.2% GDP growth in a year.
Yeah, they're still
Not
doing pretty
too
well.
shabby, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. They're still one of the economies globally that still clearly has a significant amount of, I would imagine, long-term growth if they continue on this kind of path that they've been on for, 2, 3 decades now, since they've kind of shifted
Yeah.
how they deal with the economy. So, yeah.
Yeah. So GDP growth for the full year was 5.2%, slightly more than the official target, but the recovery was far shakier than analysts and investors expected, with a deepening property crisis, mounting deflationary risks, and tepid demand casting a pall over the outlook for this year. So to put things in perspective as well, I want to say, 5.2%, put things in perspective, the American economy expanded an annualized 4.9% in the third quarter of 2023. Australia was 2.1% from September 2022 to September 2023 as well. So they also gave a few more. We have a few more detailed statistics as well. So retail sales grew by 7.4% in December from a year ago, missing expectations for 8% growth. Industrial production rose by 6.8% in December from a year earlier, beating forecasts of 6.6% growth. This is quite interesting. Fixed asset investment for 2023 rose by 3%, a touch above the predicted 2.9% increase, but within fixed asset investment, real estate dropped by 9.6% in 2023. Investment in infrastructure rose by 5.9%, while that in manufacturing grew by 6.5%. So
Right.
I thought on the topic of real estate, we'll kind of add a little bit more flavor. China's December new home prices fell at the fastest pace in nearly 9 years, marking the sixth straight month of declines, NBS data showed. So property sales by floor area fell 8.5% for the year, while new construction starts plunged 20.4%.
Wow. That's
So,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
they've been
their real estate sector is still suffering.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember exactly when a few of those very large Chinese development companies went under. I don't think it was last year. I think maybe it was in 2022 was when things started
I think
to.
that's when they had some problems, but I think Evergrande went bust last year.
It was last year. Yeah, maybe it was early last year. Yeah, so they've certainly seen a very difficult real estate market, and yeah, the real estate cycles can be quite long if you have big collapses, and big vacancies and big debts that need to be rolled over. It can take a long time for development to spin back up. So that is a crazy stat that you just read out there. The construction starts plunging 20%. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, it will have flow-on effects, you're right. Online retail sales of physical goods rose by 8.4%, accounting for nearly 28% of overall retail sales. So that is promising. The Statistics Bureau also said retail sales in services surged by 20% in 2023 from a year ago. So good news there. And yes, we also have China commenting on their youth unemployment crisis. So excluding people still in school, the unemployment rate for young people aged 16 to 24 was 14.9%, while the rate in cities in December was 5.1%. So the Bureau had temporarily suspended the release of the younger age group's unemployment rate in summer, citing the need to reassess calculation methods.
Yeah. Yeah, when the number gets high, you reassess. Yeah. Hang on a second.
When the number
that
gets
can't
too
be
high,
right.
you're calculating it wrong.
Exactly.
And we need to reassess how to calculate
It can't be right. It can't possibly right.
So funny.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how for the longest time it's like, what constitutes a recession? 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. No, that's not it. I know that we have had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth in a row. Okay, but that's not how we calculate it these days.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the same thing can be even said for inflation. There's a website called Shadow Inflation Statistics that looks at if you measure US inflation the way that it was calculated back in the 80s, and it actually just tracks it, because the actual methodology that goes into some of the numbers in inflation has changed a lot. And it's actually been very deflationary, some of their changes. So it's quite astounding to look at how the measurement has changed and how it makes inflation look actually better than it probably is, or at least better than how it was previously measured. So, fiddling with measurements, especially as it pertains to the economy and governments, is not something that's new.
Yeah. I remember when you told me that. You told me that that's the shadow inflation stuff and how they changed how they calculate inflation over time.
Yeah.
And I remember you telling me at the time, like, yeah, sure, it might say 9.1%, but if you use this shadow inflation, it's like 20% inflation right now.
Yeah.
Like higher than what we saw in the what America saw in the 70s.
Yeah.
We did not see it. We were not born.
No, exactly. And I think now, I checked the other day, I think the shadow stats says that US inflation is about, 7% if you measure it the same way as back in the 80s. So, about double what it's currently being reported as. So, who knows? Maybe that figure is wrong in some ways. The current figure is wrong in some ways. But it is interesting to look at, because I think a lot of people's personal experience with inflation is that it's felt much more than the headline numbers that are being reported, especially 3% inflation last year. I think a lot of people felt that prices rose, more than that throughout last year.
Yeah.